Very long journey. It's about 5 hours to Dubai. Then from Dubai to Seattle is over 14 hours. For me, I was worried about that journey. And as you know, I'm not a government official. I'm not eligible for government funding. I was worried about traveling in that economy class. So when I talked to the deputy speaker who invited me, she assured me that she would ensure that I get a business class ticket. And when we arrived, we dropped our bags at the hotel and immediately went to the hospital. We were ushered into Jacob's room on the intensive care floor. Before we entered the room, the Minister of Health had told us we should prepare ourselves to see Jacob like we had never seen him before. She told us, the man you are going to see is not the Jacob you know. He has lost a lot of weight and he is very ill. So we were prepared, but not as much. He was not on oxygen. He was breathing normally. He was, of course, in the intensive care unit. We tried to call his name. He could open his eyes once in a while and see us, and I could see that he recognized us. And when he recognized us, his face became very sad. It was like he was telling himself, this is goodbye. And tears were streaming out of the corner of his eyes. We also witnessed him being taken out of the intensive care unit, outside the hospital balcony, so that he could be in the sun. There was a bright sun and some fresh air for about 30 minutes. And then they brought him back in. And then we prayed for him and left. The next day, we met his doctor at the hospital before seeing him. The doctor described to us in detail what they were dealing with. And he focused on cancer. And that's where we got our answer to the question, why Seattle? That hospital is called the University of Washington Medical Center. And it has what is known as the Fred Hutch Cancer Research Center or Institute. It is one of the world's leading cancer research centers. And it was named after an American footballer who died of cancer. And they have developed new technologies for which they have won the Nobel Prize in medicine, where they harvest from a patient some blood cells, what they call the T cells, and they take it to the laboratory and modify those cells genetically, equipping them with capabilities of fighting cancer cells. So they then reintroduce the modified cells into the patient's body, and basically they go to war with the cancer cells. And through that, they prolong a patient's life and they restore the health of a patient. We had many stories of people who have been able to live long. We were told of a Canadian who had lived for close to 15 years, and she's still alive. That was the reason Jacob was taken to that facility in Seattle. But to be able to undergo that process, your body must be able to produce those blood cells. The doctor said Jacob was not producing those blood cells, so it became impossible to harvest the cells for the procedure to take place. The details of that procedure are technical. I didn't understand all of it. What I'm sharing with you is what I could grasp as a layman. It is basically like taking your blood cells, training them, equipping them to become soldiers to come back and fight cancer. That's the technology. So they thought that maybe if they got one of his siblings, they could harvest his cells. And if he's genetically compatible with Jacob's genes, then they could modify probably his brother's blood cells and then reintroduce them into Jacob's bloodstream so that they can fight the cancer. That would have been an option, and that's one of the reasons why we went with his brother. But even then, the doctors had already concluded that Jacob was physically not in a position to take that kind of procedure. His organs were too weak. They needed time to boost themselves up, but at the same time, the cancer was also growing. So on that second visit, the doctor basically told us, Jacob is going to slip away anytime. And he told us it can be today, it can be tomorrow, it can be the day after, next week, 2 weeks, or later. But it's a matter of time. And he told us, as doctors, all they were doing was to ensure that Jacob spent his last days on earth as comfortably as possible, without pain. That's what they were managing. And that's why when we found him, he was heavily sedated with a lot of painkillers. That is when I put out that tweet and ended it with, "It is well." And everybody was interpreting it in their own way. But from my point of view, it was my way of saying, it is goodbye. We have to accept the inevitable. And we told the deputy speaker, who was traveling back with the minister, to now come back with Jacob's brother, so that Jacob's brother could go and brief Jacob's father and the other members of the family in Omoro. We also made a decision to come back. But Jacob went even earlier than we had thought. On the day we were supposed to come back on Sunday, we had planned to visit him, but in the night of Saturday, I got a call from the Chief Justice saying, "Your brother has gone." So we were advised not to make any communication because the president needed to ensure that all the family members have first gotten to know about the death of Jacob, then the rest of the world would be informed. So we were monitoring the president's communication. The moment we saw his communication, then we also issued our individual statements. Those were the final days, and that is what I witnessed. So if you ask why Mao, I have been very close to Jacob from 1988. In Makerere, we had what we call the Pentagon, which had myself, Jacob, Mr. Frank Othembi, who is the director of the Law Development Center, Mr. Frank Olok, who for long was working with the Export Promotion Board and then into coffee export. He has been an expatriate in Southern Africa, Switzerland, and Kenya. And then our another close friend called Stephen Kajubi Sepuya. That's what we call the Pentagon. So now we say the Pentagon has become a square. When another one of us goes, it will become a triangle. Then when another one goes, it will now be a line with the 2 dots. Then when another one goes, it will now remain 1 dot. and then it will disappear. Because of that closeness and the journey we have shared as student leaders in Makerere, as political leaders from the north, as personal friends, I believe those are the reasons that I was invited to travel to Seattle. Every time as a political leader I travel to speak to Ugandans, one of the issues they are concerned about is poor staffing of hospitals and health centers, lack of drugs, and a very low budget that is allocated to health, and of course the corruption in the health centers and the lack of equipment even for testing. That is a fact. It is not an opinion. When I tell you that the whole of Acholi and even West Nile does not have a CT scan machine, that is not an opinion. It is a fact. Now, the reason people get referrals depends on the nature of the illness. We find that there are Canadians who are treated in the same hospital where Jacob was. I don't think the reason is because Canada's healthcare system has collapsed. The reason is because you must look for the best. Even lawyers, I can refer a client to another lawyer who has better skills in a particular field. Sometimes clients are also referred to me because of my expertise. And patients are also referred from lower health centers to referral hospitals. But when you are referred outside Uganda, sometimes it is a result of a mentality. I was referred to Nairobi, having spent over 1 week in Gulu. In Nairobi, I found a Ugandan, Professor Godfrey Nserekolule. He was my doctor. So I am running away from Uganda, and I find a Ugandan doctor in Nairobi. Why is he able to treat me in Nairobi? Because there were better equipment and facilities. When I fell sick again, I was taken to IHK. And when there was a proposal by my friends, you know, families and friends are always at the center of pushing that a patient be taken out. Somehow we feel that our facilities out, the facilities out are better. My doctor at IHK said, there is nothing they are going to do in India that cannot be done here. My friends wanted to charter a private jet to take me to India. The doctor said, no, this man will die over the Indian Ocean. There is nothing that is going to be done there that we cannot do. And I got well from IHK. So it is a debate. Do we just lament? Because the people who are lamenting the most need to tell us and to advocate for what needs to be done. But it is also about the work ethic. Even well-equipped hospitals, you find the work ethics are poor. So the discussion around the sickness and death of Honorable Oulanyah is healthy. And it is now time for the media to join by highlighting the shortcomings in our health facilities. Our ambulance system. A healthcare system is multi-sectoral. How does my uncle, who is in Amuru, where there is no road, get to hospital? So it is about infrastructure, but it is also about prevention. It is about having diagnostic facilities. Many Ugandans go out even for medical checkup. How come we cannot have good medical checkup here? Perhaps if Jacob had been diagnosed much earlier, he would not be dealing with an advanced case of cancer.